There. Today is January 6, 2009 at the Glenview Public Library. We are with Dorothy Murphy, who was born September 2nd, 1927. We are with Annie Boswell, Carrie Hanson, and Matt Moore with the Veterans History Project with the Glenview Public Library and Glenbrook South High School. Dorothy Murphy was in the U.S. Cadet Nurse Corps and did her training at Mount Sinai Hospital in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now she will give us a statement on the U.S. Cadet Nurse Corps.
In World War II, approximately 250,000 nurses joined the armed services. This left the local hospitals in critical shape. Many clinics were closed, immunizations were canceled, babies were delivered at home without any medical help, and wards were closed in hospitals. It was a critical situation. Representative Francis Bolton of Ohio proposed a bill to found a cadet nurse corps, and so it was established July 1st, 1943. The nurse corps was administered by the U.S. Public Health Service. It was not the U.S. military. And it had an accelerated education program. It provided the housing, the uniforms, the books, all paid for by the U.S. government. But in return, the cadet nurses had to pledge that when they completed their 3-year program and became RNs, they had to join the service or go into critical civilian nursing. And that, under those circumstances, the government would pay for all their bills. And in addition, got $15 a month stipend. So it is estimated that in the hospitals that were affiliated with the Cadet Nurse Corps, 80% of the nursing in those hospitals was done by the cadet nurses.
What inspired you to join the cadet nurses initially?
Well, my father had been in the hospital quite a bit. And I had a brother in the service, and my cousin was in the service, and I thought I could help my country too.
Were you prepared to travel and go to another country, and was that something that interested you?
No, that didn't come up because the nursing program was 3 years, and it was all at the same hospital except for two services, and they were at other hospitals in the area. So there was no travel involved. But yes, if I joined the service, I would have been prepared to go to other countries.
And had you had interest in medicine and nursing in the past?
Not really, no.
At the time when you began your training, were you in a relationship, or did you have family or children?
Well, my family lived in Milwaukee, so it's not far. And I did have a boyfriend who was in the service. He was in the Navy.
And was he overseas at the time?
Well, he was on a ship sailing.
Yeah.
So, yes, he was on overseas, going to other countries, but he was on a boat.
And do you have any specific memories of your training and about the procedures or any significant stories to share?
Yes, I do. Since I just completed half of the 3-year program, which was a cadet nursing program, I did not get the outdoor uniforms, but the government did pay for everything else because we were still needed. And so, one thing that we did get, and I forgot to tell you, is caps. You had to earn your nursing cap, and this is the nursing cap right here. That Mount Sinai Hospital nursing cap. It took 6 months. In 6 months, you had a ceremony in which you got your cap, and you could use that. But yes, it was very interesting right from the start. In fact, a few days after I got to the hospital, we were in the hospital emptying bedpans, taking food to the patients, doing other chores until we learned other procedures, but very simple procedures at first. But no one was allowed on the floor until they had a demonstration of how to do things, even serve the patients, take away the empty trays. That was demonstrated before we ever got on the floor. But we were working in the hospital every day. And because we had classes, our hospital time was 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. Because then from 10 a.m. through 4 p.m. we had our classes. And that way, the most busy times in the hospital, serving the trays, giving the medications, giving enemas or whatever needed to be done, were done morning or at bedtime. And we were there then, and it allowed us time to go to classes. Now the hospital classes, the nursing arts classes were taught at our hospital. But the other classes, such as physiology, anatomy, trying to think of the other ones, biology, microbiology, were taught at a vocational school. And there were 3 hospitals in Milwaukee that had student nurses. And all of us, all 3 hospitals, the student nurses went to the same vocational school. It was within walking distance. But all the other things, such as changing dressings, bed baths, giving medications, oral and rectal temperatures, were taught at the hospital itself. And one of the doctors was an obstetrician. And he felt that he was up nights delivering babies. Now, I should backtrack and say that if you were on day duty, that was, you could go to classes and be reasonably awake. But if you, later on, you had night duty, then you got off of work at 7 o'clock, and at 9 or 9:30 you had to get ready to walk over to a vocational school, which that did not give much time to sleep. So the student nurses would often be dozing off. Now, as I say, the obstetrician felt he was up nights delivering babies, and if he was there awake, well, the student nurses could stay awake too, and if he saw one nodding off, he would take a blackboard eraser and toss it at her to wake her up.
And what do you remember about the social atmosphere of the hospital, and did you make friendships there?
Yes, we did. We made friendships, and not only that, but periodically they would have dances at which servicemen who were home on leave would come to the dances. So it was very enjoyable. And we had celebrated holidays as a group. And my classmates came from all of Wisconsin. In fact, one actually came from New York, but most of them were from Wisconsin.
And was Mount Sinai and the other 2 schools in Milwaukee, were those the most common places to go for nursing education?
I think so, yes. Also, I should tell you that we could not give the patients injections until we tried them out on ourselves. And we started out by injecting oranges. And then later on, we injected each other with normal saline solution, so we'd get the feel of it. And not only that, but we would practice enemas on each other before we were allowed to give it to a patient. So that was maybe not interesting, but it's trying times. Also, I should say that the program was accelerated because they really wanted us full-time on the floor as soon as possible. In anatomy class, the instructor said, memorize all the bones of the human body tonight because you're going to be tested tomorrow. And offhand, I didn't think it was possible. There are about 206 bones in the human body. But we got back to the dorm and all of us helped each other, study. And sure enough, the next day we all passed the test.
Do you feel that your background in medicine and in nursing has helped you in other aspects of life since then?
It has helped a great deal with the children. I've had 2 children, and it really helped a great deal to have that background, yes.
And have you been more interested in new technologies and new discoveries in medicine because you do have this background?
I'm very interested, right, yes.
And have you, or do you feel like you have been good changes and good advancements?
I think so. For one advancement that I can tell you, or a couple of advancements I can tell you about, is penicillin back then was in a tablet form. And we had to dissolve it before we could pick it up with the syringe. And today it is not that way. And the other thing is each nurse's station had a Bunsen burner. Do you know what a Bunsen burner is?
Mm-hmm.
And on that, in that Bunsen burner, is where we sterilize the needles for the hypodermics. And also, we would put the tablet of penicillin in that. We had deep kind of spoons in which we would hold over the flame. And that dissolved that penicillin. And so we could pull it up into the syringe. Then we sterilize the needle, and we put it onto the syringe on a tray with the patient's medical needs, and take it to the room to inject to the patient. And today, I don't think you see Bunsen burners on the head nurse's desk.
About the war and what it was like to be in the United States at that time, what was the atmosphere of the country like, and particularly Milwaukee?
Well, people were very patriotic, and we were so busy that we didn't really pay that much attention. Of course, we kept up with the war, events of the war, but we were asked to help out in bond drives. We went to theaters to help out in our uniform, to have people buy bonds. We would participate in parades for patriotic parades. So we were aware from that point of view. We were active that way.
And how old were you at the time that you began your training?
I was 18.
So as a young adult, did you feel, or like what were your opinions on the war itself, and how much were you exposed to it?
Well, I was exposed through my brother and through my cousin and through friends. A lot of young men from my high school class, for example, left early. They didn't graduate with my class because they went off to war, because they wanted to go to some special service as opposed to just being drafted into the Army. So I was very aware of it.
And what other kinds of changes happened in people's lives? We hear a lot about different reforms and things like that, and different things that people would do in their communities. And you talked about bond drives. Were there any other?
Well, there were, of course, a gasoline shortage, rationing of food, and I'm trying to think of some other things. That was such a long time ago. I know something else too. When I was in high school, I volunteered for the Red Cross. We actually rolled bandages. Today, I think those would all be done commercially, but back then, we rolled bandages, and you had to be very careful. You didn't have any rough edge on the gauze. It had to be folded in such a way all the edges were tucked in. So that was a war effort too.
And did you feel like the community around you, everyone was very engaged in those activities? Did there seem to be public support?
I think there's a great deal of public support because of the draft. For one thing, almost every family was affected by the draft. If you had a young man in your family, he was drafted. And a lot of fathers, some fathers, not a lot, but some fathers too. And some fathers just enlisted because a teenage son had been drafted.
How did your individual family react to your brother's draft?
Well, we were worried, of course, having seen him go off to war. But since everybody was involved, we just didn't think about it too much. We corresponded, and instead of letters, they had a special form. It was very small, and I think it was photographed. And that's what went overseas to your serviceman instead of the actual letter. I can't remember what it was called. It had a special name. So that way you could get a lot more mail in the same space as a normal large letter would take.
And did you feel that that correspondence was easy to do, or did it take a lot of time?
Didn't take a lot of time because it would always take a while for the serviceman to answer. it was difficult too because they were not allowed to say a lot about where they were or what they were actually doing. But it was still good to hear because then you knew that person was still alive.
And today we have a lot of media outlets and sources for news. How did you keep updated on what was happening in the conflict throughout high school and in your training?
Through the radio, yes. TV had not really taken hold yet.
Mm-hmm.
But we listened to the radio and eagerly morning and night to hear what was going on.
And following your training, what did you do?
I worked at a bank and eventually as a teller, and then I went back to school. But meanwhile, I got married and had children, and when my youngest went back to school, that's when I really went to school almost full time.
And can you tell us about that education?
Well, I was older than a lot of the students, but it was a time when we actually formed a comeback club because so many mothers had decided that they wanted to go finish their college education. So it was very interesting from that point of view that more women had decided they wanted to complete their education. I also had some college courses earlier, but now I was really dwelling on it, really putting a lot of time into it.
And what did you study and where did you go?
I studied education, and I got a Bachelor of Education from National College of Education, which is now National Louis University. And then I got a Master of Arts in Education from Northwestern University, also in education. And then I went into editing. I worked on a 5th grade reader for a while. I worked on everything from preschool through adult basic education in audiovisual materials. And then I worked in a library of a company that has environmental newsletters.
And do you feel like your training and your experiences at Mount Sinai in Milwaukee helped you in ways in your career later?
It did in a way because if there was anything in the materials about medication or about nurses, I would really look forward to it, to seeing that. Oh, because even in 5th grade readers, you have some materials on future jobs, for example. So to that extent, it was interesting.
And do you have any other memories or stories that you wanted to share before ending the interview about the service or after the service?
Well, I think I told you about all the services that I had been in before, but one of the things that I remember very well is that in surgery, first of all, you would spend the time in days, and then later on, you had to go to nights. Now, the night nurse came on at 11 o'clock, and she worked till 7 in the morning. But the student had to go to class the next day. So they had a room right next to the surgery with a cot in it where you slept. The student, the cadet, slept there. And in the night, you had only emergency surgery. So if someone came in for emergency surgery, the night nurse would wake you up. And first thing you had to do was you consulted a loose leaf book they had there, which had all the surgeons, the surgeries that surgeon would do, and the tools or instruments he needed for his surgery. Now the night nurse who woke you up told you who the surgeon was and what type of surgery. Was it an appendectomy or whatever, what type of surgery. So then the cadet nurse went to this book, looked up the surgeon and what the type of surgery, got the instruments that surgeon required, and autoclaved them. I don't know what they do today, but that is how we sterilize the instruments, in autoclave. Then you took them out of there and put them on a tray next to the operating table. In the operating room, there was a scrub nurse who scrubbed up with the doctor, and she handed instruments to the doctor as he needed them. And there was a circulating nurse. And the cadet nurse was a circulating nurse. And what she did was she kept track of the sponges that were on the scrub nurse's table. She put them there. They had to be sterile, of course. And then, as a doctor or the scrub nurse used a sponge and it became soiled, they'd throw it on the floor. The circulating nurse had to pick up those sponges. And I had a tape, like a tree, with wooden pegs sticking out, and I kept those sponges in groups of 10. At the end of the surgery, the doctor would ask how many sponges there were. The scrub nurse would count the sponges on her tray. I counted the sponges on the tree, and the total had to be the total I started out with, because you did not want to leave a sponge in the patient. When the doctor found out all the sponges were accounted for, he would put in final stitches and close up the patient. So that was kind of interesting.
And what advice would you have for someone today who was a young adult and wanting to do a service like this for the country or for an organization, and would you recommend it?
I would recommend it, but I think it's a valuable experience. Yes. One of the other side effects of being a cadet nurse was that 3 autopsies were required, and I did see all 3 autopsies. As soon as there was an autopsy, it would be announced at the nurses' residence, and if you were not on duty or not in class, you were expected to go watch the autopsy. So I did see that.
Was that one of the more difficult parts of your training?
It was difficult in that you wondered about who it was. They always kept most of the body covered with sheets, except the part that they were working on, and they would expose another part when they worked on another part. So you kept thinking, I wonder who's under that sheet, you know? It was very difficult the first time, and it gets easier.
What would you say was the most rewarding part of the experience?
Being able to help people, I think, yes. A lot of the patients were very thankful, very, very appreciative.
And are there any other stories that you wanted to make sure you shared before?
Let me take a quick look here. See. I did take some notes because that was a long time ago and I've forgotten a lot. I think that was pretty good. That's about it.
Did you want to share about your hat? And about how you had to make it?
This looks like a white apron until you start folding it. And I did show my pictures. I do have pictures here. Anyway, if you fold the apron in such a way that you get all these pleats. And each hospital had its own cap. This was the Mount Sinai Hospital cap, had all the pleats. Other hospitals had a black band across the top or little stripes. And it was earned after 6 months of being a cadet nurse. But I think probably we ought to show some of these pictures.
Yeah.
This is a cadet nurse uniform. I don't know where to put it right there. It was gray wool, came with a little beret. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is myself in my cadet uniform. I did not have the gray wool one. Here we are in the student nurses lounge studying together. I'm in this, on this end. That's me. And here I am. This is very difficult, but it was a very small snapshot in my nurse's cape. The nurse's residence was across the street from the hospital. So we would just throw on the cape, and that seemed warm enough just to go back and forth from the nurse's residence to the hospital.
Oh, would you like to show your cape?
Oh, yes, thank you. And this is the cape that was in that last picture. On one side it says Mount Sinai, MTS. On the other side it says student nurse. And inside is the place where my initials are. My Dorothy Frida Bräutigam, that is my maiden name. And it was very warm. We could just put that on over our uniform and get to the nurse's dorm, and you pick up our mail, for example, and dash back to the hospital.
Milwaukee's cold. Yeah.